Right, welcome to the third session. So in today's session, we'll be starting with the input output. We'll do couple of problems, and then we can going to talk about the control structure. So let's start. So far we have discussed the basics of Python. We discussed data types, variables, statements, operators, and then last time we discussed more on input and output. Basically, when we talk about the input and output in Python, we talk about three ways of outputting, formatted output of different operators. So especially we talk about the string module operator, and then use of format method, and finally we talk about f strings. Okay, so let's start with a simple example, right? So let's say we are going to create a simple Python program like this. So it should ask couple of questions from a person, get his first name, last name, and date of birth, and then finally, let's say it's going to print the statement. Now, for example, what you see here in blue color is the prompt, and the red color is what user inputs. This is an example. For example, first your program should ask what is enter your first name, and then you enter your first name. Then program should request enter your last name. Then you should enter the last name. Then you print date of birth, you get month, day, and year. Finally, you should print a message like this, right? So I want you to start developing this small Python program, focusing on formatted output that we have discussed, right? Okay, let's start there. So given that you have already done this in the assignment, so we need like two inputs here, three inputs here. Basically, you need the 5 input statements and 2 print statement to print this line and the last line. So you can use any of the print statement that we have discussed. Okay. And the next one is also the same. You can get 2 numbers, but here you have to be a bit careful because the 2 inputs we expect to get 2 numbers. So you have to use converter function, because what you get is a string value. We need to convert into a number. And finally, you can use output statements. Good. And thanks for reminding me that already you have done this. Okay, so let's start today's topic. We are going to talk about in Python structured programming construct. And under that, we are going to look at control structures. Now, before we talk about the control structures, first of all, we are going to learn another data type, which we call Boolean data type, or in short, we say bool. Now, the idea of Boolean data type is, especially when you have only 2 possible outcomes like true, false, we can make use of this Boolean type. But remember, in Python, this true and false, the first letter should be capitalized, right? That means T with capital T and false with capital F. If you try all simple, then you might get an F, right? So let me show you this. Let me try. Simply just check in these types. So I'm going to get the 2 types, true, false, and they are special values we use. So according to this one, if you take as it is, we can say, okay, I'm going to take a code window. So under the code window, we can say, okay, the type true. So you see it's a blue color because capitalization matters. And the answer that we are going to expect from this is bool. Similarly, try type force as well. So you should be getting the same answer. Right. So the next one, similarly, you can try type false, and then you should get bool. If you try simple true and false, you should get an errors because Python will not understand this. Okay, right. Next one. The next part, I would like to discuss some Boolean expressions. But because in control structures, what we are going to do is you are going to evaluate some expressions. And to see whether they are true or false, depend on the value, then we are going to decide what needs to be done, right? Now, for example, if you take the first statement, you have to read it like this. It says, okay, we are checking whether 5 is equal to 3 plus 2. We check whether it's equal. So we can say, right? So if you take 5 and we are going to check whether it's equal to, 3 plus 2. And then, yeah, basically it's the same, right? So your right hand side and left hand sides are equal to each other. So it should tell us that this inequality is true, right? Now check the second one. We are checking whether 5, whether is equal to 6. And then depend on the value. So we know we check whether 5 is equal to 6. And it should tell us that, okay, it's not equal. So the value is false. Third one. Now, how about the last statement? You see some string values and plus, which is string concatenation, right? And we can see that when you have plus concatenation operation, the two strings glued together, basically that is also true. So when you have hell and low plus glue together, so we know that if you have hell plus low, this is we call concatenation. So we get the string hello. So in that sense, we are checking whether our left hand side is equal to right hand side, and it should tell us that it's true, right? So now if you click on this, I can say, okay, check L plus low, is it equal to hello? And we can check that it's true. Okay, right. Now, similar to what we have seen earlier, there are a couple of comparison operators you should know. So the first operator is used to check whether it's less than or greater than. Or the third one, we can say you can check whether it's less than or equal, or greater than or equal to, And the next one is equal to, and finally we have not equal to, right? So these are called comparison operators. Generally, when we have conditions to check, we may use one of these operators. Right. Then next one. Now sometimes we have to combine multiple expressions together, multiple comparison operators together. So whenever we want to connect multiple comparison operators, we can use logical operators. So there are three logical operators we are going to discuss: AND operator, operator, and NOT operator, right? So let's see some examples. Now the first one, AND operator. So AND operator works like this. So if both statements, both expressions, the comparison operators, comparison expressions, if they will be true, then the whole expression becomes true. So for example, in this example, what you see is you are checking whether x is greater than 0. At the same time, you check whether it's x less than 10. If the value of x is in between, this whole expression evaluates to true. So let's see that. So now I'm going to check that. So let's say we have a variable x. Let's say that is 5. Okay. And let's check whether it's greater than 0. So the possibility is we will get x greater than 0. We know the value of x, yes, it is greater than 0. So the outcome we expect is true. Similarly, we can check whether x is less than 10. Right? So that is also true. So since both these expressions evaluate true, when you combine both with AND, that means x greater than 0 and x less than 10. When we combine both using AND operator, the outcome will be true. Right? So it says true. Because x is greater than 0, at the same time x is less than 10. So it's true. Okay. Right. Operator works on the other hand. If one of the expression evaluates true, then the whole expression becomes true. Right. Now let's look at like this. Let's say n is equal to 4. Right? And let's look at what we are trying to do here. We have AND mod operator 2. We check whether it's equal to 0. Or in mod operator 3, whether it's equal to 0. So this mod operator means you divide by 2 and you get the remainder. So it's like this. So when you say n equals 4, we know that when you divide n by 2, the remainder is, right? You divide n by 2 and the remainder should be 0. It's perfectly divides. But let's say you divide this by 3. So that means you divide, yes, 4 by 3. The remainder should be 1, isn't it? Now, when you check whether n is divisible by 2, this is how we can check. Divisible means when you divide a number perfectly, the remainder should be 0. So now we are checking whether the n mod 2, whether it's equal to 0. In other words, we can say we will check whether n is divisible by 2. It says true. But at the same time, if you check this one, whether this is also true, we have 4, which divides by 3. The remainder is 1, so which is false. But when you combine the two, so when you have, okay, this is mod operator, n mod 2, whether it's equal to 0, or n mod 3, whether it's equal to 0. So in operator works when one of the expression evaluated true. So therefore, the whole expression becomes true. Okay, let's look at the last one. So last one we call not operator. So in not operator works the opposite. When you say not true, it says false, right? Similarly, when you say not false, then it becomes true. Then it's true. Right. Now, when you say not operator, let's say we have x is 10, y is 20, right? So we set two values. If you ask like x is greater than y, we know x is 10, y is 20, so it should tell us false because x is not greater than y. So if you say not x greater than y, in other words, we can say whether x is not greater than y. So it liberated true. So summary, we already discussed, we can use comparison operators. The outcome will be Boolean value. And further, when you want to combine multiple operators, we can use 3 logical operators: AND operator, operator, and not operator. Right. Now let's look at some statements in Python. Right now, so far, we execute everything from beginning to the end, but we can have branches. So when you talk about branches, there are 2 types we call selections or repetitions. So if you look at the Python statement, we can use if statement, for statement, and while statement, depending on what we want to develop. And they are known as control flow structures. Right. Now let's start with the statement. Now, if statement is used for selection, remember the selections we discussed. So if there will be a condition, and then if so, you are going to do something, then else, the opposite, right? And then you can have another condition with elif statement. Right. Now let's look at how we could, convert this into a Python program. Yes, any ideas? Can you try and let me know in the chat? Right, let's discuss. First of all, we can see this is a flow chart which shows you, getting a number from the user. So you get a number from the user, and simply what you do, if the number is a negative number, then you multiply the number by -1 so that, it will become a positive value. Simply, when you say absolute value, you can discard the negativity of that number. You can get the number, right? So that's what we are going to do. So if when user inputs a negative number, we make it a positive. But if user input a positive number, we do nothing, right? So that's why in the fourth statement, we are not going to do anything. Right, now, to do this, let's start. We'll talk about how we could do this, right? And for that, let's start first taking the number, right? Okay, let me take my, right. So this is what we are going to do. So the first one, okay, this is to find value of a number, right? Now, we are going to find the absolute value of a number. First of all, we have to get a number. Let's say my variable is number. So we know that we have to use an input function. And then we have to say, okay, enter a number. So this is how we are going to get it. Now, this is a number, right? So which means we need to convert using some converter. In this particular case, I will convert the value into an integer value. Right now, we have the number. Right now, this is a selection, right? So selection means we are going to work on a condition. If condition is true, we are going to do something. So in this particular case, we can say if to indicate that this is a selection, and then we can have a condition, right? So the condition is we have to check whether the number is less than 0. And remember the colon, this is what usually we use, indicate that the end of this first statement. And if it is less than 0, this is what we are going to do. So we will get the number and we multiply by -1. So if the number is negative, we are going to multiply by number 1 and then we'll reassign into variable number. So that's all what we have. And simply we will say print. So I can have a message. And then we can say, okay, this is the number, right? Okay, so let me run. So when I run this, here is how it works. So it'll ask a number, let's say +5, and I will press enter and says the absolute value of the number is 5. So let me rerun. This time I'm going to say -5. And when I press enter, right? So this time it's negative. So you get -5 into -1, which equals +5. So the absolute value of the number is 5. This is how it look like. Okay. So what we did, we got the number from the user and we converted to integer value. If the value is less than 0, that means we are checking whether the number is a negative value. If so, we multiply by -1 so that the number becomes a positive number. So we'll print it. So whenever you put a negative number, it will go through this selection and it will multiply with -1. But if it is a positive, then this condition becomes false and it won't go inside, just simply print it. Right. So this is what we have seen earlier. So let's look at another example. Right. But before that, let's just discuss a couple of ideas, especially blocks in Python. Now remember that some statements go inside the selection statement, if. So in Python, there's no end if. So this to indicate that the block is within another statement, we use spaces. So you can see if I go back to my previous one, so you can see there are some spaces within if statement. This is to say that this statement is within this state. right? So the spaces in the beginning will indicate that it's indentation. So in Python, you have to remember to use proper indentation all the time. Otherwise, you will get an error. So remember, you have to have same indentation. Usually, we can use 4 spaces, or some cases even 2 spaces working, but it should be consistent. So if you have wrong indentation, usually you will get errors. Right. Let's move to another example. Okay, can you start working on this one? So in this example, we are going to write a Python program. We'll get marks of a subject, and we will say pass if marks is greater than or equal to 50. Or you will have print fail if marks are less than 50. Okay, so let's start. So in this particular case, I'm going to get marks. So how to get to marks? So we have to use input function, and let's convert it to integer value. So I will say in input, I will say enter marks, right? So we get marks. Now remember, we have now 2 outcomes. If marks is greater than or equal to 50, we already know, right? Indentation is very important. We will say pass. So far we have discussed this. Now, if the marks is not greater than or equal to 50, so it should, we have to say fail. So that part we have to go back. We have to say else colon to say that if it is not true, then what do you do? So I will say, okay, print fail. So as you can see, now this is what we have. If the marks is greater than 50, it should say pass. Otherwise, it should say fail. So let's run this. So when you run this, it will ask for a marks. Let's say 75. You know that when you say marks 75, it'll check whether 75 is greater than or equal to 50. Yes, true. Then it says pass. Let me rerun. Let's put 50. What will happen? If it is 50, we check whether marks is greater than or equal to 50. It's equal to 50. So it should tell us that it's pass. One more. Let's put 25 and see what will happen. So you check whether 25 is greater than or equal to 50. No. So it should tell us fail, right? So you got the idea, right? So this is how we can, get marks for a subject. And then if it is greater than or equal to, we say pass. Otherwise, we will say fail. Right. Okay. So let's move to the next one then. Right. So we have seen that we get the marks from the user, we convert into integer value. If it is greater than or equal to 50, we say pass. Otherwise, we will say fail. Right. Okay. So let's move to another one. So this time, I want you to work on this problem. So only difference from the previous one is we have two select statements. So this program get temperature value, and depending on the temperature, we are going to tell, or we are going to output state of water. So for example, we know that if the temperature is less than 0, it should be in ice. Between 0 to 100, it should be water. Above 100, it should be steam. Okay, so let's start this. So let's see how we can address this. So first of all, you have to get a temperature value, right? Then you have a select statement. So when the condition is true, you are going to print ice because temperature is less than 0. If not, you have another two choices. That means the else part, you have to have another selection statement, isn't it? If it is true, then you say print ice. If it is false, then you have another statement. So simply, you now should figure it out that, there should be a if statement within another if statement. Okay. Okay, let's try. Right. Now, let's start. So in this particular case, as I told you earlier, the first step is we have to get the temperature value, right? So let's start with that. Okay. So in this particular example, we are going to write a program to find the state of water using if else. Right. Now, first of all, we have to get the temperature value, right? So we can say temperature. You can have a shorter one, right? We can get int and input because we want to get a number, right? We get the temperature value. Now this part is over. Right. Now let's see the condition part. Now when we talk about the condition part, you have to start with if. So it's a selection. First part is we can check whether temperature is less than 0. If this is the case, we know the state of water is in ice, right? And then the else part. Remember, the indentation is important. So you can see this is in a same line, whereas this is with some spaces that within this one. So when you say else part, within that else part, we have two more to decide. Two more means we have to check whether it's water or steam. So here we have to have another selection. So I can say if. So this time I can check whether the temperature is less than or equal to 100. So we know that when we come here, it means temperature is greater than 0, right? And we are checking whether it's less than or equal to 100. If that is the case, we can say the state is water. We can say this is a water state. If not, that means else, we can simply say, okay, right, steam. And that's all. So remember that this is important. So this will indicate the end of this, end if. You don't have to explicitly type this. So let's run. So here is how we are going to run. And then we are going to observe everything. So for example, we can say, okay, temperature is, let's say -5. And it should say ice, isn't it? Let me run again. Let's say temperature is 25. If that is the case, we know that the temperature is not less than 0, it's greater than 0. And it is less than or equal to 100. So which means it's in between, you have to have water. Let's read it again. So if, let's say, temperature is 25, we say it's water. So let's say the temperature is 105. 105. So you know that it's stream, right? So we checked, or here is the whole program. We check, start with getting temperature value. And then we have to use two select statement, because in the select statement, you can only check two values. Then we have to check three values. So you need two statements. Right. Okay. So the next one, we have discussed about simple selection in Python, use of if, then if and else, and now we have nested ifs. So we sometimes call nested selection. Right. Let's move to the next one. Now, the next one, what I'm going to discuss is the same code, we can make it compact by combining else and if together, right? So whenever you have a situation like nested ifs like this, and for compact representation, we can always use, right, what we call if else. So let's start. So let me discuss that. So I'm going to go back to my same code. I'm going to make a copy of this. I'm going to make a copy. I select it, Control C, copy, and then I will take a new code window and I will paste it, Control V. Right, now this is what I'm going to do. Now, for a compact factorization, especially when you have nested ifs like this, we can combine both else and if together. So we call elif, right? So you can see that it's aligned to this one, the same line, right? And then, okay, so we have else, we have print water. Now, next one, we can take else part, right? And in else part, also should align with the other two, right? So I will remove the spaces so that if elif else will be in the same line and the print statement also in the same line. So this is a good whenever you have large number of if else statements. So I'm going to change this. So we use if, elif, and else. Right. Now try this one. And when you finish, please raise your hands. Run and observe, check with some testing values, see whether your code is working. We'll talk about the repetition. We are going to talk about mainly two Python statement. The first, let's start with the while statement. So in while statement, it works whenever the condition is set to true. So this is normally called a looping statement. And in Python, actually, there's a else clause in case Optionally, you can use it. So let's see how we can use while statement. Now, have a look at the flow chart first. So in this particular case, let's say we want to print numbers from 1 to 10. Simply, somebody can write 10 statements, 10 print statements. For example, so you can see here, I have used like 10 print statement and it basically print 10 numbers. Nothing wrong in this statement. But the problem is we are repeating the print statement 10 times. What about if you ask to print 100 numbers? So this is not an efficient way of writing answer to the question like this. So when you're repeating something, the idea of this is we can use, instead of writing 10 statement, we can say print some variable. So in this particular case, let's say our variable is a number. So let's say we have a common variable, we will say number. And under the number, we can use the statement. Let's say we want to repeat 10 times. Now the problem is, now we have to provide some number to this. So we can initialize saying that, okay, number should start with 1. So we can say number equals 1, right? So now let's see what will happen. So it will print 1. Now the while statement, as I told you earlier, it works whenever the condition is set to true. So I will put while true. Remember our Boolean value, while true. Now, can you tell me what is the outcome of this program? Yes. What is the outcome of this program? If I run, what will be the outcome? Yes, Prasad? Yes. Try running this and observe the outcome. Right. So let's run this, and you can see that it will print 1, right? It's a never ending loop. It won't stop, right? Why? Because while loop, the condition we set to true always. So let's stop, right? Now remember one thing, after 1, we need to print 2. So that means we want to increase the number by 1. So in programming, this is how we will write this. We will say, okay, number equals number plus 1. Remember this statement. This is not mathematics. In mathematically, we cannot write like this. So program in programming, so this means always you work on right-hand side and assign the value in the left-hand side. So what this statement means, get the current number, add 1 to it, and then reassign. So when you start with 1, so number plus 1 means 1 plus 1, the number becomes 2, right? And then loop. So if you run now, you will observe that it will keep on increasing, right? Earlier, we have not seen this. Again, there's no stop. So the issue is, now we want to stop. We have to set the condition so that the number, we have to set the condition we have to set so that when the number is 10, we want to stop. So we can say, okay, number and 10, we want to do something. Remember that what needs to be done? We have to finish, stop when the number becomes 10. So as long as number is less than or equal to 10, we know this will repeat. So let's start. If the number is 1, when 1 is less than or equal to 10, it will print. Then it becomes 2. Again, 2, you check whether it's less than or equal to 10. You print 2, 2 plus 1, it becomes 3. So it loops like this. So what happens when number is equal to 9, let's say, print 9, 9 plus 1, it becomes 10. You check whether the 10 is less than or equal to 10. Yes, you print 10, 10 plus 1, it becomes 11. 11, is it less than 10? No, then it will come out. So it will stop when numbers becomes 10, right? So this Python set of statement or this small Python program will print numbers from 1 to 10. Okay, just type it, run it, and when you finish, please raise your hands. Okay, now let's see the note again. Now you can see the trick that we have used here. We will actually perform this particular statement multiple times. And how we did it, we put up a loop. Whenever a condition is true, we will repeat. So we put up the condition so that this will run exactly 10 times, and then it will print numbers from 1 to 10. This is the trick that we have used. Okay. Now I have a small question just to see whether you have understood. I want everybody to answer this question. Now let's say I want to print numbers from 1 to 100, not 1 to 10. I want to change the number. I want to print numbers from 1 to 100. Can you tell me, right, which place I should change? By changing a one single place in this code, you can print numbers from 1 to 100. Right. So I'm getting answers. Now, remember, when you have a loop, there are three important places you have to look at it. First one, the starting value. Second one, this increment. In our case, we always increase the number by 1. Third one, the condition, right? Now, my question was how to print numbers from 1 to 100. So to do that, what do you have to check? So we have to get this. Let's take this one. Let me copy paste. I would like to do it in separately, right? Now take the code, just change 100. And if you run it, now you can see it will print numbers from 1 to 100, isn't it? So simple as that. You see, it will print numbers from 1 to 100. Okay. Another question, right? Again, I want everybody to answer. Now, let's look at this printing numbers from 1 to 100. I want to print odd numbers from 1 to 100. By changing a single place in this code, I can print, odd numbers. So which place I should change? Right, you can see now. I told you you have to look at three places. The starting value, we start with 1, no change. Then the increment. Now after 1, we need to print 3, right? And then 5, then 7. So the increment should be the number equals number plus 2, isn't it? And the end value is 100, so nothing, no change here. But just by changing the plus 1 into plus 2, we can make it to print only the odd numbers between 1 to 100. Sitara, your answer is also correct, but only problem is it won't stop less than or equal to 100. So that where the problem comes in. Otherwise, your equation is okay. Right, good. One more question. Let's say I want to print even numbers between 1 to 100. By changing a single place in this code, I can do that. So tell me which place I should change. Yes. So we know that in again, you can start looking at the starting value. So the first even number is 2 between 1 to 100. So by changing the starting value, isn't it? If you make it to 2, and this should print, right? Even numbers from between 1 to 100. Isn't it? Right. Okay. One last question. Okay. Write a Python code to print numbers from 10 to 1. Okay, so I want you to write a Python code. This time, write a code to print numbers from 10 to 1. Right? So let's start. And share me the code. So as I told you earlier, you have to focus on 3 things: starting value, increment, decrement, and also, right, the condition. Right? I got a couple of answers, so I'm waiting for the others to answer as well. Now, first of all, the starting value. So let's say my variable is I. You can use any variable. Let me say I. So the starting value should be 10, isn't it? We start with 10, right? And I have to have a while loop. I want to figure out what the condition is. I didn't put the condition yet. And I have to say print I. So it will print 10, right? Now, after it will print 10, we have to subtract 1, isn't it? Because we have 10. The next one we have to print is 9. So this is how we will write. So we have to say I equals I minus 1. So idea is you get the current value of I, subtract 1, reassign. It becomes 9. So it goes on like 10, 9, 8, and so on. So that means whenever I and 1, we have to do something, right? Because this is the stopping criteria. So the I should, what should happen? I with 1 to condition true. You start with 10, right? So it should be greater than or equal. So both conditions are okay. I have seen like some of you have put like I greater than 0. That is correct. Like Nilantha, your answer is correct. So I prefer to use like greater than or equal to 1. That's okay. But Anjana, you have to check your answer greater than or equal to 0. That is a problem because it's then try to print 0 as well because I want to print like 10 to 1. Okay. And also, like when you have like conditions, make sure that checking one condition is enough, right? Now, for example, when we have a set of conditions, let's say between 10 and 1, by checking whether I is greater than or equal 1 is enough. And you don't have to check everything. So make a note of this, try this code. So in our case, when I print this, now you can see it will print numbers from 10 to 1. Okay, right. So try my code, and if you finish and if your code is working, then you can raise your hands. Then we'll move to the next one. Right. Good. Anjana Sitara, you finished, right? Okay. Right. Let's move on to the next part. Now, I told you like there are two Python statement I'm going to discuss. The first one is while loop, then for loop. Remember, while loop works whenever condition is evaluated true. That means if you don't know the number of time loop repeat, the best one would be while loop. But for a loop, let's say you know how many times you are going to repeat, then best to use the for statement. So for in statement is another looping statements. And simply we can use for various tasks we will see in future sessions. For the time being, we can say it can even iterate a sequence of objects, right? So what it means, for example, it can iterate through the elements in a string, like characters, or in a list, and so on, right? Okay, now, before we talk about for loop, we have to learn another function called range function. Now, range function can take 3 arguments, and how it used normally is start and end value, right? I will explain. So let me take some board to explain this, right? Now, what we are going to discuss is range function. Now, range can take 3 values. You can have start, stop, and step, right? So if you have one value, range indicate the stop value. For example, if you have range, let's say 5, it start with 0, right? If you didn't specify the start, it's always start with 0 and iterate over 1 at a time. So it goes like 1, 2, 3, up to 4, up to 5 without including 5. Remember, this is also very important. So when you say range 5, that means you have one argument. When you have one argument, you specify stop value. So that means it will always start with 0 and then 1, 2, 3, 4. Not including 5. Remember that, very important. If you specify 2 values, then you specify normally start and stop value. For example, let's say range 1, 5. So what it means, you start with 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 5, right? Not including 5. Last one. If you have all 3 values, then you are going to specify start, stop, and step, right? So what it means, like let's say range 1 comma 5 comma 2. So it goes like this. You start with 1, and since step is 2, 1 plus 2, that is 3, then plus 2, that is 5, but 5 value should be less than 5, right? We already discussed. So that, when you put 1 comma 5 comma 2, the outcome will be 1 and 3. So this is how the range works. Make a note of this, and once you finish, let me know, then I will go back to the slide again. Finished? Right. Without a for loop, you cannot, see the outcome. So take down only the as a note, then I'll explain. Yes, finished. Shall we move on to the slide? Right. Let's move on. Right. Now, um, so whenever you want to write a for loop, now you can combine this with range function. So let me take an example. So I'm going to take this. So let's say for loop for, you have to take a variable. Let's say I in range. Let's start with 5 and you have a colon, and within the loop you can say whatever you want to do. Let's say I'm going to print. So what happens now? We know that this will work. Start with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So when you say print I, this should print 0 to 4, right? Now you can play around, check the other values, and see whether the values that we have discussed are getting. Right. Okay. So let's try the other values. So when you say 1 comma 5, we know the only the change is you start with 1, goes up to, in this case, 4, not including 5. So if you put step, so now you know what will happen. It will have 1 and 2. Small question. If I want to print numbers from 1 to 10, what should be my code? Yes, what should be my code? Yes. So simply I can say what? When I say 1 to 10, you have to start with 1, right? Comma. So how many arguments you need? 2, 3? 2 is enough, right? If I want to print from 1 to 10, then I will put 11 here, right? I can put 11. So simply, it will print numbers from 1 to 10. So play around with this and get familiar and come back for the next session. So now we are going to have our Kahoot session, right? Once you are finished, get ready for the Kahoot session. Right. So let's start. Right, there are two more to join. Can you please hurry up? Okay, so let's start. Okay, so let's see the today's winners. Third place was Adarshi. Congratulations. Second place, 2305. And the first place goes to 2303. Who's 2303, by the way? Can you raise your hands? Okay, Rakshana. And then 2305. Okay, Nilanta, congratulations. Okay, we'll meet next week then.